extraordinaire, the great George Papadopoulos, author of Deep State Target. Welcome to the show, George. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Tricia. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, I want to jump right in. Anybody that has read your book knows that it reads like the sequel to a Jason Bourne movie or novel. But it's, it's far, far more horrific than that, isn't it? I mean, you lived through being, as the title of your book says, a deep state target. And I think we're seeing some similarities with what's going on right now. But you said something very interesting in your book. You said, this is what happens when you work for Trump. Those words were sobering, especially with what's going on now. Share with us, that was right at the beginning of the book when you started to realize what exactly was happening to you. What did that mean to you then, and how does that translate into what's going on now?
Wow, you brought back some very interesting memories, and I'm glad you did remember that very dark quotes from the book, and that quote was from FBI agents, by the way. And let me just get into the context of what that was about, how my story really fits into the greater story of what's happening even today with Mar-A-Lago and the raid on various Trump inner circle associates. If you had asked me 6 years ago if a deep state even existed, I probably would have laughed and just, kind of smirked and said, it's conspiracy stuff. Before I worked on both Ben Carson and Trump's presidential campaigns, I was really in a very establishment type of working environment in Washington, D.C. A lot of ex-Reagan people, George H.W. Bush officials, George W. Bush officials, some of even the architects of both the Iraq and Afghanistan war were basically working at the same think tank that I was working at. So you can really understand the years leading up to me working on two renegade presidential campaigns. So in 2015, I was looking at the political circle. We were in the middle of a presidential campaign season, and I saw that people like Jeb Bush or even Marco Rubio or some of these other folks really didn't represent what the American people wanted back then. Back then, what the American people wanted were jobs brought back to America, the border secure, and to stop ISIS from cutting people's heads off. That's what Trump really was focusing in on. He had that positive, coherent, concise message that not only resonated with me, but with millions of other Americans. So I decided to join two renegade campaigns, first with Carson, then with Trump. And immediately upon joining these campaigns, I started to really realize that there was an entrenched system or a deck stacked against these outsider candidates. And what do I mean by this? Right when I joined Trump's campaign, I have various diplomats who we later find out were spies meeting with me. I had the FBI throwing honeypots at me, which a honeypot is basically a pretty woman that the FBI or the CIA sends at you to try and entrap you into something illegal. It didn't work on me. And they were trying to do it with General Flynn, with others. They even wiretapped Trump Tower, as the president has mentioned numerous times. So this is what happens when you work with Trump, quote for my book was exactly what we're talking about today. It's the entrenched bureaucracy, the deep states, trying to prevent an outsider from ever getting to the Oval Office and shaking things up, and they will stop at nothing to get that initiated. I was the first casualty of this, but we have seen the strategy become much more dangerous and insidious now with the unprecedented raid of Mar-A-Lago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and scroll forward, it's deja vu all over again, isn't it? And we saw it started with the raid on Mar-A-Lago, and that's been in the works for quite some time. I mean, this has been the Biden DOJ, the Biden regime has wanted to set this up for a number of reasons, in my opinion. I'd like to share a theory that I have with you after we kind of get the meat and potatoes out. But I think that this has been a long time coming. The quick and easy fix that they're getting by this is that they're trying to taint President Trump before another presidential run. I think they know that he'll win, and they're trying to do all they can to taint him as a president his character, the whole 9 yards. But I think that the additional goal is more nefarious. I think it's linked to globalist goals as well. But walk me through when you see Steve Bannon, when you see, what they intended to look like a perp walk. They want to make this as visible and as painful as possible, sending a clear message that, don't associate with President Trump because this is what's going to happen. And it goes to that quote in your book. I mean, the other thing is you describe those who arrested you as an army of terror. I thought that was so impactful and so poignant. Do you recognize some of these same characteristics in what happened at the Mar-A-Lago raid and how these other Trump associates and affiliates are being targeted? And do you see a larger global connection in what this nefarious goal is by the Biden regime?
Wow. Okay. So in 2016, the deep state, the Obama DOJ, and their ability to prevent the smooth transition of power from Obama to Trump was a lot more subtle, or at least they hoped it would have been a lot more subtle, a lot more quiet. They thought it would really be a silent coup. And that's why you had the FBI colluding with the media to perpetuate this propaganda about Russia collusion, about Trump not being a viable president, that he was installed by the Kremlin, that he was illegally appointed, so that they could really overthrow him either through impeachment or possibly other means. And that's really what Mueller was all about. Mueller was never there to investigate anything. And I'm talking as somebody who's lived this from the inside out. Mueller was there to cover up the legal spying, the legal behavior and activities of the Comey politicized FBI. That's exactly why once Comey got fired, then they got Mueller appointed through Rosenstein because Trump started to sense that there was something illegal going on behind the scenes. Trump began to understand that there was an illegal effort to overthrow him, and that's why I believe he smelled Comey out and he rightfully fired him. So then Mueller came in, and as Trump is fighting back against being framed the way he's been doing recently, they were threatening him with obstruction like they are today. So it's the same playbook. The only difference between what happened back then is, like I said, it was really the first time in modern history that a coup effort was publicized. So I think that they were trying to keep it as low temperature, as quiet as possible. But now that Durham is exposing what the FBI did, he's indicting FBI lawyers. There's a trial next month of Christopher Steele's top source, Igor Danchenko. The FBI and the DOJ under Merrick Garland are running amok. They're desperate to intimidate and to silence the Trump voters, the Trump supporters, and the Trump inner circle from not holding rallies anymore, not getting America First patriots elected in the most important midterms right around the corner, and to prevent Trump from running again in 2024. So it's really a throw the kitchen sink at this and see what sticks kind of effort by the DOJ. It's going to fail. And I think Durham has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and he's going to expose a lot next month with this new trial.
We are all at the edge of our seat ready to see this because I think things are coming to a head. You also said in your book that you knew who was pulling the strings. You knew who was targeting you. And, I'd love to hear more about that. And I'd love to weave that into this larger issue that's going on now. Do you see connections? Do you see this as a continuation of what you went through? Do you think that the same bad actors are at work? Do you see, when you say that you knew who targeted you, who were you talking about?
So you mentioned a very important point about the globalist agenda. And like I said, if we had been having this interview 6 years ago, I probably would have laughed at these questions or I would answer. But I have an answer now because I lived this agenda. And the reason it's so important about this globalist agenda that you mentioned is because we have to remember what was going on in 2016. In 2016, you had 2 terms of Obama who was pushing a globalist agenda with the EU and the countries in Southeast Asia, including Japan, Australia, that were all trying to do two things. One, they wanted to push the TPP, which was the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreements, which would have basically wiped out and decimated even more US industries and outsourced more jobs to the Asian economies while destroying American jobs. And in Europe, what you had was Brexit.